I'm Daniel Hill. I'm the convener of the Catholic chaplaincies for UTS and Sydney University. I'm a PhD student at Sydney University studying medieval history, but today's talk is not on, well, specifically medieval history, but actually is on something that medieval philosophers spent a lot of time on. And the question is, what is the truth? So I'm looking at the idea of truth. So I first probably should outline what this talk is not about, because the whole question of truth is something you can spend your entire life on. So this talk is a basic outline. It doesn't attempt to explain in detail all the various modern philosophical theories of truth, and you should be happy about that considering how many there are out there. Type in truth into Wikipedia and see how long it takes before your mind explodes. I'm not attempting to look into all the aspects of scientific or historical research that may appear to contradict the Bible. So I'm not talking about the truth of the Bible, whether it's historically accurate or not, whether, I'm not combating atheism, whether God exists. That's not the kind of truth I'm necessarily focusing on. I'm not attempting to look into detail at what religion is the most correct. And I'm definitely not going to go into a study of the semantic meaning of truth, which is, in my opinion, a ridiculous argument in any case. Go on Wikipedia, have a look. Okay, so let's begin. I want to open with a quote from the Gospel of John. Pilate therefore said to him, "Art thou a king then?" Jesus answered, "Thou sayest I am a king, for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, that I should give testimony to the truth. Everyone is on the side of truth heareth my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" So here we have a very, very famous episode, a very, very famous line. An episode where the two extremes when it comes to the notions of truth in the world are juxtaposed. While Christ himself makes the amazing statement that he is the ambassador of truth itself, Pilate, the exact opposite, questions and denies its very existence. And we'll talk about that episode briefly later on. So some overarching questions to pose. I don't claim I'm going to answer them all definitively, but some questions to pose are: is there truth in the world? Is there an objective reality, or does it just depend on my point of view? Is it subjective, in other words? Is my conscience all-powerful? Are there moral truths? Are all religions equal and true in their own ways? So let's start with a few definitions to kind of get the playing field level. Truth. What do we mean by truth? I would propose by truth we mean that which exists, that which is correct or accurate. Anybody have any opposition to that definition? That's what truth is, the basic level. Okay, the definition: objective reality. Reality dependent on the existence of a thing. For example, an elephant. Okay? Objective reality is an elephant is an elephant. Love is love, tires are tires. Another way of saying this is absolute truth. So a thing that exists is. Okay, very basic. Okay, let's look at the definition of subjectivity. Subjectivity is the way an objective reality is perceived through our intellect and senses. Everything we do is subjective, in a sense. We walk because of certain personal reasons. We go to university for various reasons. But even though we see the world through our own senses and intellect, what we perceive is based upon objective reality. So I'm going well beyond the definition now, having an expose on subjectivity. For instance, you're all sitting here listening to me speak, but some of you may see me as a big bearded oaf. Others know me as Daniel, and some of you are probably lost and are just too polite to leave. Okay, so you're all here. The objective reality is we're all here, but our own subjective understanding of that reality is quite different. As I said, we all see reality through our own senses, but that does not change the fact that you are here at UTS in the Multifaith room number 1 are listening to me speak. Okay, that is the basic objective truth, whether or not you want to be here. Relativism. Okay, the idea that truth is defined by the individual, not by objectivity. Generally, relativists confine their beliefs to moral truth. Generally. They are happy to believe that an apple is an apple, but not necessarily happy to believe that an embryo is a person or that life is sacred. Well, they might, but they're not necessarily happy to just accept that as a truth. In essence, relativists believe that the subjective view of things is the truth itself, and not something objective outside themselves to which they should conform their lives. So according to relativism, I could believe that murdering Adrian was good in one case, while another person may not, and both would be true. I decide, as a quote, I decide for myself what is real and what is right and wrong. No one can tell me what to do. Is a kind of a possible catch cry for those who are relativists. This is not just some philosophical idea, however. The relativist view of the world is dominated in our culture and systems, and is inherent in how the modern Australian world works, at least in a lot of it anyway. Relativism is in fact, from my opinion, my research, heavily derived from Protestantism, which people might find shocking. But we got to the point in Protestantism where your own personal interpretation of scriptures was given pride of place. You know, that's kind of the first institutionalized versions of relativism. That the Holy Spirit guides me, and that's it. There's nothing else to judge upon. Now that's kind of paraphrasing a whole 100 years of Protestant development, but we can follow, in my opinion, and a lot of philosophers agree, the rise of relativism in the Enlightenment through to the modern age, and follow a little thread back to Martin Luther. But I'm not going to go into that. You can ask me a question if you like. Okay, so we've got a general idea of what I mean when I say certain things. So let's have a look at perhaps one question. Does objective truth exist? And it's one of the simplest questions of all, yet you may think it's rather obvious, but it is the most basic and essential question that has been asked by philosophers over the centuries, from Plato and Aristotle to Nietzsche and Wottua, or John Paul II. And I would answer yes. Objective truth does exist in all situations, and it is up to us to find out what it is. Okay, so that's what I would say. Objective truth exists in moral situations and in physical situations. And well, you can argue that they're not separate. A moral situation is also a physical situation in every circumstance. Okay, there are three ways to refute the idea that there's no such thing as truth. One is through our senses. You know, our senses are designed to give us information about physical reality. An honest relativist would never be able to eat anything unless he first tested it in the UTS labs to see if it was really baked vegetable frittata on his plate, but then he would have to trust the lab equipment. Okay, so we're given senses. These senses tell us something. Now they can be skewed. Nothing is perfectly trustworthy in itself. But if you are a real relativist, you couldn't say that you're actually a definite that you're here or that you exist. The Matrix is perhaps a movie that explores that. The second is to point out the unchanging nature of reality. Things exist whether nobody, a small number, or everybody believes them or not. It rains whether we believe it to or not. The earth has always been round, even if nobody believed it to be or have been. So when, which is a bit of a myth, but when, in the early centuries people said the earth was flat, it wasn't actually flat. And then they discovered it was round. It didn't kind of bend in on itself and become round to suit our own desires. The objective reality that this is a table and it's here exists whether you guys can see it or not, or whether you believe it to be the case or not. It's there, and it does not depend upon our perception.